Inclusion and Technology, Connecting the Dots. Today we have with us Arnav Karlputkar. He is a third year BTech in Mechanical Engineering at IIT Bombay. He aspires to pursue a career in space technology and is an ardent fan of motor racing and geopolitics. Having been diagnosed to be on the autism spectrum at the age of 8, he has since then worked hard on understanding, working on, and through the various aspects of autism that affect his life on day-to-day basis. He has always been part of mainstream educational and social communities, but it has not always been an easy journey. Apart from working hard on himself, Arnav has been blessed with a strong support system that has helped him achieve his goals so far. He has a long way to go, especially as he dives into a larger world. It is now even more important and necessary for him to create an awareness about autism in society at large. And in doing so, he hopes to help many others like him. We also have Anuprita Kallikar. She is a psychologist and a practicing counselor. She has a bachelor's degree in child development and a master's in medical and psychiatric social welfare, as well as in clinical psychology. Over the years, Anuprita has conducted innumerable workshops for children, parents and school teachers. Currently, she is also an active crusader for autism advocacy. Let us put our hands together and welcome both of them.
Good evening all of you, and thank you very much for coming over. This is a subject very dear to us because it's part of our everyday life. I would like to, I know some of you have to do here as part of the course content, but I would like to ask all of you why you think autism awareness is important? Why necessary? Why am I standing here, and why is there a World Month for Autism Awareness? Why such a big deal about autism?
So I'm not too much aware of autism, but all the learning disabilities, like not disabilities or just special abilities like dyslexia, all get kind of ignored in the current education system that we have. And somewhere down the line you will land up in an art school somewhere out there and you realize all the difficulties that you've been facing. But because of these learning difficulties, that made your life pretty difficult. And nobody seems to understand them, and you feel left out.
Anybody else?
My family has 2-3 members related to this, and I'm working with a group which is having such type of
So autism is much more widespread in the society as compared to what awareness is, and therefore it is very important that we get to know about ASD and all its nuances. It's very
Absolutely.
without awareness there is no inclusion. That's all.
So, and sometimes inclusion, as we have experienced it firsthand, is about tolerance, and it's not really tolerance that we are looking for. We are talking about serious inclusion. Okay. Okay. Considering there weren't too many hands up among the students about why the necessity for awareness, can I begin with what is autism? What is your understanding of autism? And I need more answers here because that's when we begin.
As far as I know about autism, it is a state of mind which a child gets stuck. So their environment is somewhat different from the normal people. So that has to be catered. They have to be seen like that, and they have to be grown up like that. Understanding should be there with the other people as well as to the kid also.
Anyone else?
So,
Take the mic.
a few years ago, I was reading one autobiography of Achyut Godwale, he is IIT alumnus, and his own kid has autism. So that way I get to know about autism. So in Marathi it is called Swamagnata, ya phir Atmamagnata. So these children find it difficult to make sense of outer world. They are so much into themselves that it affects their daily actions and so career and other all things. So they need special care and very empathetic treatment for that. So that's what I mean.
Anyone else?
So I think autism, few words came up in what others said that they are not like the normal ones. So I just want to say that there is nothing called normal ones. So in Sitara we talk about context specific problem and context specific solutions. So just autism is a different context which larger society fails to understand, and that is why the awareness is also important. And this I would only say it's a context specific case. That's it.
To help the children and to help the parents, the children need help to be included in the society and to function on a day-to-day basis. If the parents are ignorant, they don't know how to begin, and in the process the child gets more and more difficulty. So awareness helps to build understanding about autism among parents and among the caregivers, so that the child can function and feel safer.
So I am. I think so. I'm actually going to be talking to people who know really nothing about it. Okay, and hence the awareness, because they are. Autism is a spectrum disorder, and when we say spectrum, it ranges from severe to mild. To mild. Okay. A lot of people have the understanding of autism from what it was portrayed by Shah Rukh Khan in My Name is Khan, or by Tom Cruise in Rain Man, okay? Or, when they talk about children with autism, the picture that comes to their mind is somebody who's withdrawn in their own world, who's probably swaying back and forth or flapping his or her arms, okay? And who's probably not who's probably so withdrawn that they cannot be part of our regular social milieu, okay? But it is not so, and I have a wonderful example with Arnav here, who's my son. He is a third year BTech student here. He's here entirely on his merit, and I think he is part of the mainstream in most ways that you and I can visibly see, and yet Arnav is on the spectrum. So when Arnav was actually diagnosed, and even now so many times I get told, I mean he's just so part of the mainstream that so many times I still get told that, oh, you're giving him a label only because you're a psychologist. Oh, and all these issues he has, they are there because he's your only child. Okay? So there are so many people amongst us walking around, being part of our society, who are going undiagnosed simply because we do not understand autism in its, in its full, like all the various aspects of autism. Okay? So autism is not a mental illness. Okay? It is not a mental illness, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. When we say neurodevelopmental, it's to do with your brain and the way the brain functions. Okay? And the way the brain functions, it actually affects their communication. It's not to do with the language skills. There could be children and adults who are non-verbal, who don't speak at all, but write amazing poetry. Okay? So the point is that it's not to do with their language development, it's not necessarily to do with their intelligence. Again, I'm coming back to, it is a spectrum disorder, so you could have on the one hand geniuses They are now saying that probably Einstein or even your Elon Musk is now claiming to be diagnosing himself to be on the spectrum. And on the other hand, you could have individuals who have an intellectual deficit. So it is a spectrum, and hence we need to understand it in its entirety. When they have a problem with their communication skills, and I'm saying that it's not to do with their language skills, it means that they have a problem processing social information. You know, the little nuances that we have in our conversation, you know, how easily we can say, "Arey chal yaar, kya kar raha hai? Chalo jaane, idhar jana hai." They find it very difficult to move out of their structured understanding of social communication to casual conversation. So, autism is about an issue with communication, because of which they have issues with social interactions, and hence their behavior is very often, it doesn't come across as normal, as, I don't even like to use the word normal, but as casual as all of us, or as organic. It's more bland, it's more uncomfortable, okay, very often. Autism so far has been diagnosed more in males than in females, but it's also because a lot of women are able to mask, especially when they're part of high functioning autism. They're not diagnosed, and they're so part of our cultural and social expectations that, you know, they keep doing things but are actually suffering from inside. Hence, the suicide rates among individuals with autism is rather high. And hence, this awareness is important, because as a society, we need to understand them and accept them and help them be part of our mainstream. Yeah. When I said that it's part of the brain functioning, there are several aspects of the brain that they are now, and despite so much research being done, they still don't, no neuroscientist can say for sure that it is this that is not in place for the diagnosis, or that to say that this is that causes autism. So they say that the neural connections, the nerves are sending messages from our skin, from our visual cues, from our what you hear in terms of conversation. It's all to do with nerves, one nerve, that, sending a message to the other nerve, to the other nerve. So, for autism, individuals with autism, these neural connections are not the same. Yeah. So they have, they have an issue with overactivity. It's almost like a traffic jam. So what happens is, when social information is being processed in the brain, these individuals cannot keep up with the conversation. Okay, so here I am talking one sentence after another. Okay, so for every sentence, every word I am saying, there is a neural activity in our brain that is actually registering it as a word and helping us understand what is being said. Right? So in these individuals, it's like there's so much neural activity that sometimes there's a traffic jam, and then it's like too much information is being stuck in a traffic jam, literally. And especially if there is a group and there are 2-3 people talking and there's crosstalk, then it becomes even more difficult, because then the brain is full of words which they are not able to process at that time. Does not mean if the same information is given to them slowly, they will be able to understand. Okay? So, very often, Arna would ask me when returning home from school, he would say, they said this and this and this and this. What did it mean? Then we would go down to slowly understanding it, and then we would understand. So, it is not to do with language, it is not even to do with the content. It is just to do with the speed of processing. Okay? Yes. There's also a part of the brain called the amygdala, okay, which it helps us process our emotions. So they have found out now, yet again every time I say they have found, they are still not sure. Okay? So they say that the amygdala of the brain is overactive for individuals with autism. That is in charge of processing our emotions. Okay? And it's amazing how much we take our brain for granted. All of us think that our brain is equal to intelligence. Right? But the brain is doing so much in just everything that we are saying and doing. The brain is, helping us understand. So here I am. I'm watching all of you as I speak, right? And I'm saying something. I'm talking about a topic which I have probably, worked on. I'm watching all of you. I can gauge certain expressions. I can gauge who's interested, who's not. So my brain is processing everything. Only then am I able to understand how all of you are reacting to me and yet continue saying something else. Right? Now, with the autistic brain, because of the overactivity of the amygdala, they find it difficult to process these social cues, and so they cannot sometimes say what they're saying, think of what they're saying, and also understand, facial expressions, tone of voice, whether somebody was really upset with me, whether somebody was being sarcastic. They find it a little difficult to analyze this. Also, because of the overactive amygdala, there is an increased sensitivity to stimuli. Okay, because amygdala also helps us identify or helps us, it is in charge of our experience of fear. So a lot of autistic children they have a hypersensitivity to sensory stimuli like loud noises, bright lights. So I don't know how this room is, but Anna can function best with very little light. Loud sounds startle him. Okay, so he prefers. He can actually hear. The other day, I popped a can of Coke in my kitchen, which is maybe from here, to the end of the room. That's where I was. And he was talking to a friend, and he heard me pop the bottle, the can, and he came. So if he's in another room and I whisper something to my husband, sometimes he can still hear us. Okay? So that's the overactive amygdala. Next. Okay. There's a very big chunk of their adult life as autistic that they actually, that's when people who then because they have their brain is constantly overloaded, they need a calming effect. So when you see individuals who are flapping their arms or they're swaying back and forth, they are only trying to self-regulate. And if we are memorizing something, how many of you have felt that you are doing this? This. We're doing that. It's because we're self-regulating ourselves because our brain is being taxed a little more. So their repetitive actions, their repetitive patterns of behavior come from there. And then the most important topic for today is unusual sensory responses. Like I said, Arnav is bothered by bright light, so a lot of children on the spectrum have either hypo or hypersensitivity to stimuli. Now, when we study in school, what are your five senses? We are taught only the five senses, right? Which are touch. Yeah. So actually there are so many. There's tactile, which is touch. There's vestibular, which is movement. There's proprioception, which is body position. Visual, auditory, olfactory, and gustatory. Okay? So they are constantly affected by all these senses because of the hyperactivity of the brain. Remember I said the neural connections, there's a traffic jam. So every stimulus they experience could be more, could be exaggerated because there's more neural activity. So the way they may be sensing it may be more. And can you show the film view, please? So Arnav, when he sees, he has a lot of food preferences, and not just Arnav. When I say Arnav, most people on the spectrum, they have food preferences simply because they are not able to handle the texture of the food, they are not able to handle the smell of the food, I'm the first. Yeah. Let's see how it is for them.
I'm not naughty, I'm autistic, and I just get too much information.
Now, so this may be a little exaggerated and it may not be exactly sorry. It may not be exactly what each person on the spectrum experiences, but this is how life is for them all the time. And no. And to live with that, to experience it in a room or going outside, going to the mall, experiencing that and then doing everything the way we do takes a lot. Okay? Hence, I'm actually going to be talking about those individuals today, which I already have been talking about, is the ones who are high functioning. They're called high functioning because they're part of the mainstream. They are not the ones that we have seen in movies or read about in books, or which was originally part of autism, which is the more obvious individuals who are, not as much part of the are not able to be as much part of the mainstream. These individuals are, their language development is all there. Their milestones as children are in place. They are able to join schools as children. So very often they are not able to, they're not diagnosed. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go through our own journey. I am a psychologist. When I studied, I did my double masters, and yet the only thing I studied about autism was a paragraph. Okay, and when I had Arna, we had a perpetual problem. One problem with Arna was Arna wouldn't sleep. As a baby, as a child, he wouldn't sleep. We tried, even on a 2-year-old, we tried, of course, with the doctor's prescription, we tried a Valium, a sleeping pill. And yet, Arna wouldn't sleep. And we couldn't understand why, because Arna would play with other kids. Arna would, his speech, his language development was all there. At that point, only thing I understood about autism was most of the autistic individuals are non-verbal, they are withdrawn, they do not interact with others, they have repeated, movements like moving back and forth or flapping their arms, they don't make eye contact, that's all that was known. So we did not have a diagnosis, and we actually even had him tested. He went through a full 2-day psycho-educational testing. From 9 to 5 he would go inside and he would come out. This was at Johns Hopkins in the US, and yet they could not diagnose it. Okay? That's because these individuals, the basic milestones are in place. At that point, their sensory issues are things that we take for, oh, he's just fussing about food, oh, it's okay, all he did, the only way I could get vegetables inside him. How many of you have watched Young Sheldon? Yeah. So Young Sheldon, there is that episode where the mother blends all the food. Yeah, we call it blendu. That's how Arnold ate his vegetables till he was 11, till we realized that he had a lot of sensory processing disorders. Okay? But despite me being a psychologist, I didn't know about it. Even today, psychiatrists don't understand sensory processing disorders. They need to be desensitized, which is done by an occupational therapist, and Arnav has been through a lot of therapy to help him overcome a lot of his sensory issues, which come in the way of his everyday life. He is not living on campus. He is a BTech student in IIT, but he does not live on campus. He cannot enter the mess because all the smells, the sights. You just saw that video, right? Imagine your mess. Imagine the sounds, the smells in the mess, the whole atmosphere in the mess, and what it does to him. It messes him up. So he comes home, and that's a safe haven, because people on the spectrum need that calming. So when we finally diagnosed Arnav, he was 8, and that was because he could not participate in group activities. He could not participate in games and play with other children because he would not understand what was going on. There are a lot of people out there on campus, everywhere in our life, who are going undiagnosed simply because we do not understand sensory processing disorder. And that being a major part of being the life of an autistic individual. Okay? We are just taking it as somebody being fussy, somebody being, not eccentric, not being, mature enough, things like that. Loner. Yeah. Executive functioning skills is the other part where, people on the spectrum who are from the mainstream, high functioning individuals, start to fall behind. Okay? So far our journey with Arnav has been smooth because Arnav has excelled in academics all through. And these are some of the milestones that are very stereotypically there in our head. Okay, he's doing this, sab kuch theek hai. Okay, what's the problem? Again, I'm just going to take a break and say Arnav would not, he had a sleep disorder simply because of his sensory processing disorder. His brain would be so overworked with everything that it took longer for him to calm down. Even now, he takes that much time to just unwind. That much more time because his cup is full. Our cup is half and we take whatever time to fall asleep or we knock off. Arnav takes a lot longer to calm down. Okay? When I say Arnav, it's to do with a lot of people on the spectrum. Executive functioning skills is a very important part of our everyday lives because it involves planning, it involves organization, it involves task initiation, flexibility of thought, attention, self-control, working memory, time management, and perseverance. So it involves our everyday life. Okay, when we are processing, like I said, putting our thoughts into action. And they are not able to do this very easily, because of which they start having issues keeping up with the demands of being there in the mainstream. And unless they need the biggest support for this, there's Professor Pant here whom he's worked with, and Arnav finds it very difficult to keep up deadlines, to keep up all the extra work that is given. He cannot participate in everything simultaneously like a lot of you do. I'm going to hand it over to Arnav now, where he's going to actually share his own experiences with regards to all this. I haven't actually covered anything as much as I wanted to because I was with, but they find it even difficult to maintain eye contact, as you will see now.
So I'll just be sitting since I'd like to use this mic. And just in advance apologies if I don't make eye contact and if I refer to my notes while speaking. So I know my mother has gone over a lot of generalizations for people on the spectrum, but I would like to elaborate some of my own personal experiences with respect to what has already been covered. So I'd like to start with stuff like social communication. Although I find it, I am able to maintain a one-on-one conversation, sometimes I do face difficulties is because if people are being sarcastic, for example, earlier I would find it very difficult to know if they were being sarcastic or not. Even now, sometimes I need to like do a double take and ask them, are you being sarcastic or did you intend that? And this can also extend to question papers. Like, for example, I cannot count how many marks I've lost simply because I got confused about what the question was trying to say. Like, it's not that I couldn't solve a lot of these questions, I just got confused. Oh, they wanted me to solve this instead of that. And it turned out because I misinterpreted the question, I solved a completely different question. This also happens, it's not only just exams, even labs. Sometimes I do, like compared to my group mates, I need to ask the TA or the RA in charge of the experiment, like, okay, exactly, okay, so is this how the apparatus works? Does it work like this or does it work like that? I need a bit longer to speak to them to understand exactly how everything fits together. And as you can see now, I can make, it's not that I can't make eye contact, it's just that I prefer not to. It's like, it's one more thing that while speaking, I'm making eye contact simultaneously. It's like juggling. Either I can speak or I can make eye contact. It's a bit more stressful speaking while making eye contact. And even then, stuff like non-verbal cues, body language, I can't really interpret. I don't have that kind of a grasp over that sort of stuff. Or the thing is, if I tend to misinterpret it, like if somebody is just speaking loudly, sometimes I can't tell if they're just being excited, being angry, and like that can, lead to a feedback effect, where if I think they're being upset with me, even though they're not, then I get irritable with them, and then that can actually make them like a bit upset, or that can complicate everything. Even then with social interactions, as I said, I can maintain a one-on-one conversation very well. Like I can speak up with my friends with one-on-one for hours. But the problem comes if there are more than about 3 or 4 people. After 3 people is stretching it, even 4 people is a bit too much for me. It's hard to follow what everybody is saying. It's hard for me to figure out who's speaking when. Sometimes I don't know, I can't tell if they're done speaking or then if somebody is taking a pause. So sometimes what happens is they take a pause, I start speaking and they start speaking again at the same time, and I'm like, apologize and okay, sorry, carry on. This happens a lot with me. And then especially if I really want to say something, it becomes hard to know, like I don't know, like a lot of people, they can just, it's very natural, I can just interrupt the conversation and carry on speaking, right? But that comes a lot harder with me because I don't know if it's rude to interrupt them or not. And then at the same time, if I get interrupted while speaking, I just have to kind of let it be that this is just how long the conversation is. So just dealing with a group is very, it's like confusing. And yeah, so that's why I prefer it, that's why I can't really hang out with friends, or I prefer not to. I don't tend to last in those situations for too long, I tend to just move away from that. If it's more than like just one-on-one with a friend. And coming back to sensory issues, as my mother's already discussed, sensory issues are omnipresent. So there's a bit of a myth that autistic people can smell or like hear better than others. That's not the case. It's just that whatever noise other people manage to filter out to varying degrees across different people on the spectrum, those stimuli aren't filtered out as much. So these minor irritants, they tend to build up over the course of the day. So all of this is constantly being bothered. Even now, compared to other people, I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of therapy, especially when I was in middle school. So I have been desensitized a lot compared to where I was. But for other people, and even me, after coming back from college, I tend to be very drained of energy. And that affects my ability to get work done after the 8:30 to 5 day. Even then with stuff like tactile sensory issues, I'm very particular about which clothes I wear because there are some cloth textures, even if it's the same material, just depending on the weave or how it's made, that clothes which I just don't like to wear. It's not that I can't wear those, it's just that it irritates me. It's one more irritant across the whole day. And as was shown earlier, the vestibular sense or the sensation of movement. So like something which is just an intrinsic part of IIT Bombay is like riding a bike. So I could never manage to ride a bike. I just get too scared on the bike. I just could not keep my balance. And so that's why even today, if I want to move around campus, I have to either walk or then wait for one of those e-buggies. And earlier when I was younger, and it probably still is the case for a lot of people on the spectrum, stuff like and getting on an escalator or going down a spiral staircase is a very disturbing experience. It's because you're not confident with your sense of motion. Like that feeling that you're staring out into this large open space can be very disorienting. You feel very unstable. And so going to a mall, just going up and down the escalators was a very an unpleasant experience. I wouldn't use the word scary. It was almost like a scary experience. Yeah, and even then this impacted my ability to play games like basketball and football. Because when they would kick the ball or they would throw the ball, I would always instinctively cover my face. Like in football and basketball, you're supposed to be running towards the ball. But sometimes I'd be finding myself running away from the ball. So I just could never get the hang of those games. Even stuff like working in a student team or a lab work, a lot of the times I tend to drop or knock over stuff a lot more than others. So if I'm working with motors or delicate parts, I drop a lot of stuff. So now I just say, okay, why don't you just handle it? I'm not confident. I'll probably drop it or break it. Even then, with writing with a pen, for example, it's not that I can't write with a pen, but I hold the pen in a slightly different way, and I apply a bit more pressure on the page while writing. And because of that, sometimes the ink cuts out while writing. So if I'm writing a sentence, the pen just cuts out in the middle and I have to rewrite it, and that takes more time. And even with the pencil, I tend to blunt my pencils a lot. So actually, coming back to just a little note. One example of how technology is the growth of technology is negatively affecting me probably. Like everybody I would say, but people on the spectrum disproportionately, is stuff like the growth of ChatGPT and other large language models. Because now a lot of academics are not trusting digital submissions as much, and there is a slight gradual return back to paper-based submissions. So compared to other students who can write a lot faster than me, that is an additional burden that now compared to where it was previously, where I was about the same on a digital keyboard. Now I would say that I'm about 50% or 60%. I can only write up to 50 or 60% at the speed of others. That's a major increased time investment now. Even then, as my mother had mentioned, write can be a bit it's not overwhelming. It just is, like I said, it's nothing. Where I am right now, nothing is overwhelming. It is just it tends to add up over the course of the day, and I get more tired, and my capacity to work as much is decreased. That is why I tend to keep the curtains on, and I just have just enough light to see what I'm doing, rather than keeping both lights on and even in the day. I can never understand why people like to combine both sunlight and artificial light. That gets a bit overwhelming. And even with noise, it's not that and against noise, I listen to music almost on full volume with my headphones, but that's because it is music. It's a single beat, a single rhythm. But when it's a loud restaurant, a chaotic public space with or a busy signal, where there are hundreds of noises, lots of people talking, there could be horns or there could be tableware. That is also a bit overwhelming because there's so many things to follow at once. There are so many things to follow at once, so that it does get overwhelming. Once again, sorry, I'm just referring to my notes just to make sure I'm coherent. Yeah, I think I've covered this, that I tend to preempt people's reactions, so that can lead to building up of a situation that was not there. Just excuse me for a minute. coming back to now, I'd like to speak a bit about executive functioning skills, which was covered earlier. Executive functioning skills are the ability to manage all of your tasks, to schedule, to make a plan, to follow, more importantly than planning, is to actually follow through the plan. So that's another thing that's happened to me, is that I have actually given up on planning out how I will structure my assignments. Because what would happen, especially during the JEE days, what would happen was I would wake up in the morning and I would say, okay, before lunch I'm going to solve 20 questions. But then it turns out I would get stuck on the 6th question. And then I would spend a disproportionate amount of time doing that, and then I would not be able to, and then maybe I just be able to finish 7 or 8 questions in the whole thing. And part of this is because I find it very difficult to know when to move on to the next thing. I tend to get stuck on doing one thing. A lot of the times if I'm completing
swords. So, there is definitely no issue with language development for even a non-verbal individual on the spectrum. Okay? And just because people are in the mainstream, able to articulate themselves well, does not mean they are not having issues with communication. They are struggling. They are struggling in everyday life. Arnav does not get invited to parties, and Arnav finds it very difficult to hang out with students. That makes him isolated. It leads to depression. It leads to, I call it Vikram or Vetal between him and me. And Vikram, because I have to keep